You gotta share screen on Zoom.
I need to share screen
From Zoom. Yeah, go back to this. Like bring back this.
It's okay without, I can just talk about it. I don't know how I can share when I was at home, but I
Oh, yeah.
start sharing. Okay.
That's great.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here to share this topic. This topic, let me, how do I go to the next page? Paul, how do I go to the next page? I do the
video normally.
So, okay. This topic came from a dialogue I had in my school. I teach in an IB school, and one of our topics is called TOK, Theory of Knowledge. And I was discussing with the TOK teacher about information and knowledge, and I mentioned about wisdom, and he said, we don't talk about wisdom. We just stop at knowledge. Wisdom kind of sounds like religious. So I thought, well, that wisdom is very important. We have to explore wisdom. So I started to explore the three different concepts. And I thought, well, if academic discussions don't talk about wisdom, our humanistic Buddhism can offer something to this important topic. So I start with information. Information is the basic data of facts that have been organized and structured, presented in a meaningful way. But the question is meaningful by who and to whom it's meaningful. Not everyone think the same kind of information is meaningful. It is the raw material which knowledge and understanding are derived. Information can be collected, stored, transmitted, and processed, but it doesn't necessarily imply understanding the context. A lot of this basic information, I have to confess, I got it from ChatGPT. You ask a question and they give you a pretty good answer. But the kind of ChatGPT I used is called Perplexity AI. Perplexity is more up-to-date and uses more authoritative materials than ChatGPT. Limitation of information. Nowadays, most people get news from digital devices instead of books and magazines, right? So the data shows more than 8 in 10 Americans get news from digital devices. Top 5 most popular news websites: Yahoo News, New York Times, CBS News, NBC News, and Fox News. You can imagine people who get news from, say, New York Times versus Fox News, they get information from different sources, but their understanding of the world will be very different. So the sources of information largely shapes how we understand the world. So information itself doesn't really give us much knowledge, let alone wisdom. Also, our news is profit-driven. When it is profit-driven, it skews the direction of information. As you know, a lot of people nowadays have not really trust in the media. And so what is knowledge? Knowledge goes beyond mere information. It represents the awareness of and understanding of relationships, patterns, and connections between various pieces of information. Knowledge is often acquired through learning, experience, and cognitive processing. In other words, people have processed information and to derived their own understanding. So knowledge is a more structured and organized form of understanding. It provides a foundation for decision-making and problem solving. There's a limitation of knowledge as there's a limitation of the information sources. Trust in media from Gallup survey shows just 7% of Americans have a great deal of trust and confidence in the media, and 27% have a fair amount, which means more than 50% of the population don't trust media. And one problem of the information knowledge is the so-called echoing chamber of information knowledge. If you watch certain news, you are more likely to get similar news pushed to you. So that's one of the most important reasons of the polarization of views in our society. People are just believe in what they want to believe. Not only that, we hear more negative news than positive news. That has also something to do with the profit-driven media, because media wants people to be interested and to read their news. From an evolutionary point of view, negative news often elicits a stronger emotional response than positive news. People are more likely to read negative news than positive news. So the news media feeds us more negative news that elicits strong emotional response. Testing our knowledge of the world today. So these are some questions we can kind of think about. I have to go through quickly because it takes like an hour. I can't take it now, right? At most 30 minutes. A majority of the people in the world live longer today than 50 years ago. A majority of the people in the world better off economically today than 50 years ago. A majority of the people in the world healthier today than 50 years ago. Are there more or fewer wars and military conflicts in the world today than 50 years ago? A majority of the people in the world have higher quality of life today than 50 years ago. So there's an author, Steven Pinker. He is a Canadian-American cognitive psychologist, psycholinguist, popular science author, and public intellectual. He is numbered one of the top 50 public intellectuals. He wrote several books, and this book is called Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress. And his argument is that the direction of the human development is in the long run is progressing. And in order to test, to prove his hypothesis, he has made definitions. He says indicators of quality of life, life expectancy, public health, poverty and economic well-being, education, literacy, violence reduction. Some of his data he talks about globally, but he also talks about in the United States. So according to actually this information is from ChatGPT or Perplexity. When I ask a question, they spill out information. So the reason that I say 50 years, because you can like ask questions about different times period. So here I kind of like ask questions, they give me information about like every 20 years. So from here you can see the progress that we have made. In the beginning, I said, we don't hear about progress. We hear about negative news because negative news catch people's attention more than positive news. So reading his book kind of give you more hope and a bigger perspective. And numbers do prove that at the beginning of the 20th century, global life expectancy ranging from the mid-30s to the mid-40s, the high mortality rate in infectious diseases. And every 20 years, we have made progress. But of course, the most recent trends, because of pandemic COVID-19, his book was published in 2018. So things can go back. But I have asked questions about more recent, and we have to acknowledge that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on life expectancy. And the last 3 years, we have a reverse of the longevity. Public health trends. So in terms of public health, globally, we also have made a lot of progress in infectious diseases. Now as more controlled than before. Vaccines helped to reduce many infectious diseases. And if we come back to current improvements and the challenges, we have advancement in vaccines, genomics, and precision medicine, rise of new infectious diseases, but we have controlled pretty well compared to 50 years, 100 years ago. The poverty and economic well-being. In the 1900s and 1920s, poverty rates were relatively high despite periodic economic growth in industrialized societies. 1930s, the Great Depression, of course, led to the widespread poverty and unemployment. 1940s and 60s, 1940s to 1950s, we witnessed a strong economic recovery. 1960s to 1970s, civil rights movement and social programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, and food assistance program have helped to reduce poverty rates. Moved to 1980s to 1990s, shifts in economic policies, including tax cuts and deregulations, have contributed in income inequality. And I also bring it up to date that we do see a global financial crisis in 2008, dot-com bubble, but that's before the book was published. It's just more recent information. Pandemic has impacted economic and social consequences, leading to job losses and income disparities. So since I talk about his book, there are a lot of comments on his book. So I want to touch upon the strengths and limitations of this book. the strength is by using historical data, information, and knowledge as a social scientist, valuing. So his argument is we have made a lot of progress because we have used reason, science, and humanistic values in the last few hundred years. If you go back to Middle Ages, of course, reason, science, and humanistic values were not as a mainstream thought. So we have made progress. So he contributed all the progress we made, and he believes that we will make more progress because he believes that most people now, we don't know how many, believing reason, science, and a humanistic value. Of course, here's the limitations, the data bias, skewed information knowledge. For example, he didn't highlight use data to indicate the environmental degradation that we have made in the last 100 years with the economic development. The environment has suffered, right? So that kind of data he didn't highlight. So he gives a more rosy picture of the development. So my last point is that we need to go beyond data, information, and knowledge, and we need to bring wisdom. He didn't talk about wisdom. So what does humanistic Buddhism have to offer in terms of wisdom, and why do we need it? We need wisdom because we are having problems that need wisdom to solve. At a global level, we have environmental issues, rise of AI and technological disruptions of societies, nuclear threat. At the national level, we have polarization of political views, social equity issues, and personal level, we have stress and alienation despite of the progress that we have made. And these problems cannot be solved just by reason, knowledge, and what he calls the humanistic values. Maybe we can find some wisdom from our own tradition. So what is wisdom? How is wisdom different from information and knowledge? Wisdom is a higher level of concept that involves the ability to apply knowledge and experience judiciously to make sound judgments and decisions. It's about understanding the deeper implications of actions and choices, considering long-term consequences, applying ethical and moral principles. In our culture, we usually have a pretty short-sighted views of history and the consequences. But wisdom, like we talk about our Buddhist tradition, Tinahan, we go back to thousands of years, and also think about the wisdom is beyond limited space. Wisdom is often associated with practical and thoughtful decision-making that benefits not only the individual, but also others in society as a whole. It often requires reflection, empathy, and a broader perspectives on life. So I also give this talk in another forum, and they don't know as much about humanistic Buddhism and Tinahan. But here most of you know a lot, but it's good to review. Humanistic Buddhism focuses on the practical aspects of Buddhism and its potential to address the challenges and needs of contemporary life. And one of the advantages of the humanistic Buddhism is we engage with the world, not just meditation itself, but we want to engage with the world and make contributions, positive contributions to the well-being of others and the environment. And we value compassion and altruism to alleviate suffering and promote well-being. We also talk about social and ethical responsibility, inclusivity, and universalism. And we pay a lot of attention to environmental issues, mindfulness and meditation, and we practice awareness and meditation and mindfulness. So that's kind of a quick review of humanistic Buddhism. And then Thich Nhat Hanh teaches us how to turn suffering into wisdom. And this is a short introduction of Thich Nhat Hanh. Most of us have probably know about the basic background of Thich Nhat Hanh. I would just highlight two things that we may not be aware. In 1967, Martin Luther King nominated him for Nobel Peace Prize, and he was said to have a big impact on Martin Luther King. He created the order of interbeing, and which we are part of. And by interbeing, we recognize that individuals don't exist in vacuum. We are always interrelated with each other and interrelated with our natural environment. He is also known as father of mindfulness. So because I was making a presentation on another occasion, so I told people that actually there are many centers of Thich Nhat Hanh, and Dallas we have one, and in France the biggest one is the Palm Village, right? And even in Mississippi there is a big meditation center in this tradition, so we are not alone. And I talk also about this book and the wisdom about in Thich Nhat Hanh has taught us, and he said Buddha was not a god. He was a human being like you and me. He suffered just like as we do. If we go to the Buddha with our hearts open, he will look at us, his eyes filled with compassion, and say, because there's suffering in your heart, it is possible for you to enter my heart. So suffering can open our heart to have compassion for different for people in different parts of the world, different levels of existence, and we know about 4 noble truths. All these noble truths and 8-fold paths are the ways for us to reach wisdom. And one difference between knowledge and wisdom is that wisdom is something that you have to practice and deep understanding and have compassion, not just by reasoning and logic. You do have to engage, and you have to practice and become internal drive to understand yourself, understand the world, and have compassion for all. And I always feel like touched when we recite at the closing chant. If you come here every week, you know that's how we close our service. That means we take a universal compassion for every not only every people, but also all the beings, including other sentient beings other than human beings, right? So there's a breadth and depth of the compassion, of the commitment that we want to commit. So wisdom starting from seeking understanding before judgment and be an ambassador for peace. Today, we hear people make judgments quickly without understanding, without full understanding of the situation, and want to be with one camp versus another camp. All the conflicts, all the wars, ordinary people suffer. So Thich Nhat Hanh, when he was in Vietnam and during the Vietnam War, he refused to take side, whether it's North Vietnam or South Vietnam. They wanted him to take a stand. He refused to take a stand. So he was exiled. He was not welcomed in Vietnam because he refused to take a political stand. He wanted to be an ambassador for peace, and he didn't return to, let me see if I have, he didn't return to Vietnam until 2018, and he died there. But for 30 years, he was exiled from Vietnam because neither North nor South government liked his stand. And today, it may not be popular if you don't take a particular stand, but of course, everyone is free to take a stand. But wisdom demands us to understand the situation, consider the broader context, and make choices that align with the ethical and moral principles. Our humanistic Buddhism and the legacy of Thich Nhat Hanh teaches us about the importance of interbeing and compassion, practicing mindfulness, transforming suffering into empathy and compassion, engaging with family and friends, local community, and a world with empathy, understanding, and love. Less judgment, but more empathy, understanding, and love. So my last piece is to say, let's be ambassadors to peace. Do what we can to be ambassadors to peace, and try to develop a deeper understanding and compassion, rather jumping to judgments. So that's my quick presentation. We have some time for comments.
Jan, thank you. Yeah, some of the comments, like, yeah, I wish we